I'm gonna try my hand at narrating, I think. I started with this piece of sheet metal that had a lot of paint and rust on it. I needed to give it a little bath in vinegar to hopefully remove that. And you can see after a few days of soaking, I had removed most of the rust and none of the paint, which was actually what I wanted to remove. Scrubbing with a steel brush also didn't do much, so that's pretty cool. Overall, complete waste of time.
Actually, I take that back. That was a complete waste of time.
Yep, I just said that. I then got to work unwelding all of the corners and filling my shoes up with metal dust, which worked pretty well. This next part's going to be loud. So after a whole lot of pounding and also a noise complaint.
Hi.
How long is that gonna last?
Yeah, do you need me to be quiet?
The answer to that was yes, but she was a little bit more polite about it. So I took it outside where the sound wouldn't be contained at all.
Yeah, that's really loud. That's really, really loud.
Yeah, you can hear an echo on every single one of those strikes. So after about 20 minutes of disturbing my neighbors with constant hammering noise, I took it back inside and started to lay out my pattern on the steel. And then screwed it up and started over.
This is wrong.
To cut it out, I'm just using an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. Goes pretty quick on thin material like this, but always wear your respiratory protection when you're working with steel, especially pieces like this that are covered in old paint. You never know what's in old paint. Now I had this hilarious joke planned where I was going to be like, look how lethal these burrs are on the edge, and then I was going to touch them and pretend to die. And as funny as that was, this happening while I was setting up for that joke
Nice.
was funnier than the joke was in and of itself. So I think we're just going to move on.
Don't put things made of glass near a workbench covered in other stuff.
And after removing all those lethal burrs, I'm making some relief cuts, which will hopefully make this a lot easier to bend. Now my vise isn't wide enough to actually bend any of these pieces, so I'm going to be clamping a piece of angle iron on bottom and on top of the steel. And for your convenience, I'm clamping this outside of frame. For your convenience. It wasn't too hard to bend these over just with a hammer, a little bit of pounding. Even the wide pieces bent fairly easily. But in classic fashion, I worked myself right into a corner, because now how do I bend these sides? Well, luckily I have been a nervous finger tapper for basically ever. Anytime a decision comes up, I'm always tapping my fingers on something. So I'm tapping away, and eventually all of that tapping led me to the perfect solution to my problem, which was this board right here.
Yeah, that'll work.
So I clamped that down to the bench, and then I tried to clamp the workpiece to it, but the clamp wouldn't go on anywhere, so I sort of just gave up on the clamp and bent it by hand.
I've worked myself into a bigger corner.
Right, because how do I cut this side now? Well, the answer to this and a lot of things is just monkey and just bend it by hand. Just put all your weight on it, and eventually it'll get into shape. This is 1/8 inch steel, but with those relief cuts, it actually doesn't take a huge amount of effort to bend it. Now, the final step here is to bend those wings down and then weld it all into place, but I'm still kind of scared of welding, so I'm going to cut this pipe instead. I need one longer piece and one shorter piece, and I decided that I didn't want to die, so I abandoned the angle grinder and went to a hacksaw, which took an undisclosed but significant amount of time. And then I did it again, and then once more, except I don't have a clip of the second time. So now I have a semi-annual New Year's resolution to not die from galvanization poisoning. So I'm going to give these a nice bath in some vinegar, and you can see after just a couple minutes it's already working away at that coating. And I've run myself out of other work to do, so I have to go to welding. So I'm going to hold the metal in place with this piece of wood and then tack weld it so it's held in place while I weld the whole seam. And this went great. I burnt holes in my table, and I burnt holes in the metal, and I burnt one of my fingers off, but eventually I figured out a technique and got a decent steam along at least one edge. Yeah, it took a significant amount of welding. We can just skip forward. And then I looked at it and I gave it the shrug of a man who knows that he's done his absolute best, and that his absolute best is just not very good. At least there's no holes in the edge anymore. I wanted a fold-up stand, and so I stole the idea from ZNA Productions to use a folding chair. It took me a while to find the right tool to cut this cushion off, but eventually I found the right one. Always make sure you're using the right tool when you're out in the workshop. And after nearly deafening myself by hitting this with an axe,
Oh my god, that was so loud.
I drilled a bunch of holes in it, and then hit it with an axe. I cut this bar off the back because it was stopping the pipe from being able to fit in, but then the chair sort of just fell apart. So I welded these little pieces of steel onto the chair, and then it did this. So I took the pieces of steel back off, and I welded them on about a 1/2 inch higher, and now finally I had what I would have had 20 minutes ago had I just been paying better attention. To attach this little flange on, I'm just going to be drilling some holes for bolts. I've also got to drill some holes through here for air to pass through. I want to leave it as sort of a grate to keep coals from falling down there though, so I'm going to drill holes rather than just cutting the whole circle out. Now back to my New Year's resolution. All the galvanized coating has been stripped off of these, and I figured this vinegar can remove toxic material from the outside of this pipe, so it could probably remove toxic material from the inside of me. So I've been drinking this stuff 3 times a day for the past 2 weeks, and I feel fantastic. I've been coughing up some weird green fluid, but I think that's probably just toxins leaving my body. Now to save myself a little bit of money, I'm going to spend the next 2.5 hours cutting and grinding and shaping this pipe to fit around the other pipe so that I don't have to buy a T. I'm also going to drill a hole through this pipe so that air can pass through, and then I'm going to decide that that's not big enough and just hack the whole thing to pieces with an angle grinder. Then it was time to weld again, and I had even less fun this time than I did last time. The end of the flange is a lot thinner than the rest of the pipe, so it just kept melting, and it's just kind of a mess. But I eventually got it together, and it was time to cut out some bricks to line the inside of the forge. Now the last fire bricks that I used were pretty easy to cut. I could shape them with a file, I could cut them with a hacksaw. These ones, it was like a brick. It was really, really hard. So I decided to cut it out with a chisel, chisel it into shape, if you will, or chisel it out of shape, if you will, because every single one of them cracked in a way that I didn't want it to. And then using a masonry bit and a chisel, I managed to cut, well, I ended up with 2 semicircular holes out of 2 separate bricks when I meant to do a fully circular hole out of 1 brick, but it'll still work. I chiseled the rest into shape, and then it was time for a bit of a test. So I assembled the forge, and the chair was a stupid idea because it's too short, and I had to put it up on bricks anyway. But I lined the forge with all of my bricks, taped my sister's hairdryer to the pipe, flicked it on, lit up the coals, and it got hot. It definitely hot in there. The temperature is approximately hot. And I put a railroad spike in there just as a test, and the railroad spike got hot. Can you tell that I'd rather be working on the dagger than this video? Real talk, guys. The forge, it's not perfect. The bricks, I might end up switching those out for like some refractory coating, cement, whatever, to put on the inside of there instead of the bricks. But the forge is functional, so we can use it to heat treat the dagger, which is what I really want to be working on. I really want to finish the dagger. We needed a forge first, so here's the forge. Next video, we'll get back to something that actually matters. Have a good day. I'll see you later.